the history of my African ancestors in this country in the colonial period could not be summarized with one word: slavery, which is what I'd thought up till then. I learned that there were many, many African Americans who were part of the heritage that we are all now proud to share, Crispus Attucks being one of them. And I fondly remember Mr. Rohn, a conservative, middle-aged white man in Southern California, Santa Ana, where I was born, my favorite my favorite teacher of all time, because he was a wonderful storyteller. And I remember when he taught us about Crispus Attucks, I was the only person of African descent, at least visible African descent, in the classroom. And he gave me a wink and he let me know, hey, you're a part of this story as well. And it's beyond slavery. And I remember learning, wow, Crispus Attucks, that's a name I can connect myself to. From there, I just learned more about the story. And I learned this in my later years that Crispus Attucks, while he is a patriot, and known as the first person to die, the first American colonial resident or colonist to die in the American Revolution, he was also known as a threat. So John Adams, who was an accomplished lawyer at the time, defended the 8 British soldiers who shot into the crowd and killed 5 Americans, 5 American colonists, one of them being Crispus Attucks. And John Adams' defense of those soldiers, it hinged upon the fear that was struck in their hearts at seeing what he called a muscle-bound mulatto that would strike fear in the heart of any person. So he leveraged blackness in a way that was, for him, politically expedient. And I thought, wow, this is not new. Then you look at 2020 and you look at, of course, we're all disgusted and concerned and upset about what happened to George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. And there are just different cases, and there's nuance there. There are a lot of complications. But when you think about the fact that we as Americans are about sick of seeing Black people and Black bodies brutalized in ways that are just not acceptable. And so I just kind of connected the two. A lot has changed. We're better than we've ever been, but there are still some traces, some things that are similar, that are strangely all too familiar, as I like to say, that I like to talk about, by calling people in, not calling them out, and having real discussions. And I do that by sharing a story. I think stories are the connective tissue that help communities that are diverse to move toward inclusion.
What I am hoping that the Athens Chautauqua Society and the community at large is wanting to look at not just one, but 2 academies that might have some real synergy with each other. And obviously, you all are steeped in history and performance, but the idea is we would have a public square academy, civic engagement, civil discourse, where we involve any of a number of partners, who are doing that, who have convictions in that same area, and then the Young Chautauquan Youth Performance Academy. This incredible place in history right now, as you said earlier, Sonny, it's better and it's worse too right now. But looking at what we can institutionally put in place, creating programs and curriculums, and meeting with schools, particularly the last bastion of democracy. Those are not my words. That's a loose quote. In the area of suggesting that students do the youthful version of what you all do naturally, learning not only research, but writing, performing, and becoming amateur experts on a subject, but really making history come alive.
It's funny, I believe as an artist, and Bruce, you can probably relate to this as well, poetry, performance, they flow through us, even in our study of history, because people like Winston Churchill, for example, were so artful in their oratory, in their thought. It's a form of poetry, right? Even in his diplomacy and his statesmanship. And I found the same thing as I performed the work of people like James Baldwin or W.E.B. Du Bois. And what I found is, I think about Billie Holiday's song, All of Me. Why not take all of me, right? I don't know that she wrote it, but she made that song famous, right? And I think that we as Americans, we have to come to a place, especially as we're training up young performers and thinkers and civic engagers, that we're not representing a perfect humanity or a perfect country. We're representing a beautiful humanity and a beautiful, amazing country laid out in the Declaration of Independence. And we oftentimes don't quite meet the mark, but the fact that we're aspiring toward it makes us Americans. And the fact that we do believe in liberty and justice for all, I think makes us better humans. And so I think that performance and connecting civic engagement with performance and working with youth allows us to help them to tap into their humanity and to learn to love themselves for who they are and what they are, and learn to love their country and their country people for who they are and what they are. And then and only then, I think, can we come to a place where we can come to the public sphere and be quote unquote civil. I am fond of talking about 1619 because it's a symbolic year, the first year that 20 some odd Africans were brought to the American colonies, right? A year before Plymouth Rock, before the
Right.
Pilgrim's Land of Plymouth Rock. I'm also very fond of talking about 1776, Thursday, July 4th. It was a great day. And our forefathers, yes, our forefathers, said some great things. And I think that they're both worthy of study, of celebration, of nuance, of analysis, of lamentation. When we allow people to just be ourselves, all of us, in all of our good or bad or positive or negative, our hurts, our joys, etc., we allow our humanity to breathe. And when we allow our humanity to breathe, the poesia, the creation in us comes out. And then we start to imagine what if. And we can look forward, we can look backward, we can look forward, we can start to imagine and play and tell stories. Creative power is addictive, but also it's so generative and it's full of hope. And we're able to share hope through that. So that's why I do what I do. And that's why I'm hopeful about the projects that we're all talking about now, and why I think we just need to continue to look backward, perform the now, and aspire and dream as we go forward, all on stages and spaces that we can create into performative spaces where we can wonder what if and play as if together.
I've been concerned recently. There seems to be so much history being written and so many new things being discovered. And unfortunately, it's led to a fear. People are afraid when they find out that the founding fathers had these flaws, or that the country wasn't always a perfect place and it didn't look like what I grew up seeing, which was, nothing but good things, and even the Indians just seemed very happy that their land was being walked all over. When you respond to that with fear, I think it makes people not want to read it. And I don't think you should ever be afraid of the truth or be afraid of what you find. And I think the thing that got me into the 20th century history, the age of dictators and tyrants, is I wonder sometimes if we're any farther along than we were back in the days before World War II. I wonder if we ever learn anything, if we ever turn back and say, is there anything we can learn from this? Years ago, I read a very interesting observation. Someone said that he thought that the world is still in shock from the Second World War, that so much of what we do is reactive, because we can't believe, we look back and we see what we did at Dachau and Auschwitz and Hiroshima, and we think, did we really do that? And how can we go on? And I think, as you said, when you face it, and you don't face it like it's medicine to take, you face it like it's truth to discover and yours to learn from, then even something as awful as the Second World War or the slave trade, that we can get something out of it. The more I read about Stalin and the more I read about Churchill and FDR, the more I wondered, how much of the way we are today was caused by these three men and by what happened, and how much are we still trying to undo, and how much are we still trying to recover from. That, and the fact that all of my aunts and uncles and my father and mother were all of the generation of the Second World War. And I grew up hearing them talk about the war and Hitler and Churchill and all that as though they were people that they knew. And every time I get up on stage and perform, I feel the presence of both my parents, who are gone now, and all of my aunts and uncles, most of whom are gone now. So that's where it comes for me.
My soul was dancing and jumping as you said these things. I thought about the fact that every time I get on stage, a lot of times my work there's some lamentation and there is a tearjerker. And I really do feel like I'm bringing my ancestors and my elders on the stage. I mean, I play my grandmothers and I play my mother and my father, but they're really there with me. And I love the way you just put that. Even through public figures, these public figures have become a part of our heritage. We in some ways we own them, right? Or they're a part of us. And so I love the fact that we can generously open our hearts and minds and bring those people and all of their imperfections into our imperfect bodies. And we can share with the audience my story, which is a part of your story, which becomes our story. and it becomes so very connective. Your parents, aunts, uncles come from a generation that I'm not familiar with, right? You and I are about a generation apart. And I love the fact that through performance, we can find these connections. I was reading a book recently by Resmaa Menakem, My Grandmother's Hands, and it talks about generational traumas and how we all of us as humans have been dealing with these traumas. And you think about the Holocaust, you think about chattel slavery, think about just, the Middle Ages, how insanely violent those times were for people of all backgrounds, and how if we don't deal with that trauma and process that trauma, we're doomed to repeat it and or just suffer from it for the rest of our lives. And so this whole notion of making it right, we may not be able to go back and make it right, but we can make do. We can move through it, perform with it, dance with it, talk to it, confront it, as you said. And I think in that there's generative power, there's healing power